Ultra Magnus Origin, Transformers. Ultra Magnus made his debut for American viewers in The Transformers, the movie, when he commanded the defense of Autobot City against a full-scale attack by the Decepticons after first debuting in the Japanese exclusive animated series Transformers Scramble City, which disclosed his arrival on Earth. In his American debut, Ultra Magnus unexpectedly received a promotion as the Autobots' reluctant commander. A refresher on the Transformers hero is provided here. In the long and hard-running Transformers franchise, Ultra Magnus is a pivotal character in the Autobots' continuing conflict with the Decepticons over the destiny of the universe. Ultra Magnus made his American film debut in 1986's The Transformers, the movie. He was Optimus Prime's faithful lieutenant and was chosen to succeed him as the head of the Autobots when Megatron killed Optimus. Ultra Magnus continues to play a significant role in the series, including the critically acclaimed Transformers comic series from IDW Publishing, even after the resurrection of Optimus Prime. Without further ado, let us dive right into the origins of Ultra Magnus in our video today. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Ultra Magnus Origin. Inspired by the Transformers TV show, The Transformers the Movie is a 1986 animated sci-fi action movie. On August 8th, 1986, it was made available in North America, and on December 12th, 1986, it was made available in the UK. Nelson Shin, who also created the television series, co-produced it and served as its director. Ron Friedman, who subsequently founded Bionic 6, wrote the screenplay. Judd Nelson, Eric Idle, Casey Kasem, Robert Stack, Leonard Nimoy, John Moshida Jr., Lionel Stander, Peter Cullen, Scatman Crothers, Orson Welles, and Frank Welker, who passed away 10 months before the film's release, all lend their voices to the production. Orson Welles also appears in the movie in his final acting role. Vince DiCola's electronic compositions and songs by heavy metal and rock artists like Weird Al Yankovic and Stan Bush make up the soundtrack. The plot takes place in 2005, 20 years after the second season of the television show. Optimus Prime defeats Megatron in a violent confrontation after a Decepticon attack destroys Autobot City, but the fight leaves him mortally wounded. The Decepticons are therefore forced to flee when Megatron sustains serious injuries, preserving the Autobots. Unicron, a planet-sized transformer intent on consuming Cybertron, hunts the Autobots around the cosmos and transforms Megatron into the subjugated Galvatron. Let us talk about the movie in detail. Cybertron, the planet where the Autobots were born, was overrun by the evil Decepticons in 2005. Working from Cybertron's twin moons, the valiant Autobots are getting ready for a counteroffensive. Optimus Prime, the head of the Autobots, sends a spacecraft to Earth's Autobot City to fetch supplies. However, the Decepticons learn of their scheme, murder Ironhide, Ratchet, Brawn, and Prowl, and commandeer the spacecraft. A violent struggle starts when Hot Rod, who is in Autobot City with Spike Witwicky's son, Daniel Witwicky, finds the hijacked spacecraft. At the exact moment the Decepticons are about to win, Optimus comes with reinforcements. The remaining Decepticons are forced to flee, board the Astro Train, and travel to space after Optimus decimates many of them and faces Megatron in savage combat, leaving both of them fatally wounded. Optimus hands the Matrix of Leadership to Ultra Magnus as he lies dying, informing him that it might bring light to the Autobots in their time of need. Hot Rod catches it after it falls from Optimus's hands and gives it to none other than Ultra Magnus. The body of Optimus Prime ages and discolors. The Decepticons leave Astro Train and leave Autobot City. They dump Thundercracker, Shrapnel, Skywarp, Bombshell, Kickback, and Megatron, who was abandoned by his cunning second-in-command Starscream in order to save fuel and get to Cybertron. The injured Decepticons are discovered by Unicron, a conscious planet that eats other worlds as they drift across space. In return for wrecking the Matrix, which holds the ability to kill Unicron, Megatron is offered a new body by Unicron. Galvatron is created from the remains of previous Decepticons that were sent into space, including Cyclonus. His armada, Sweeps, and Scourge, while Megatron grudgingly accepts and is transformed into Galvatron. Galvatron also receives a new spacecraft from Unicron. Galvatron ruins Starscream's inauguration as the new Decepticon leader on Cybertron and ends up killing him. The moons of Cybertron, including those housing Spike and the Autobots, are then devoured by Unicron. Galvatron, who has reclaimed control of the Decepticons, directs his troops to search for Ultra Magnus at the destroyed Autobot city. Separate shuttles used by the remaining Autobots to flee are gunned down by none other than the Decepticons and crash land on several planets. The Quintessons, a group of despots who conduct kangaroo courts as well as execute convicts by throwing them to Sharkticons, kidnap Cup and Hot Rod. Kranix, the last survivor of Lithone, a planet consumed by Unicron just at the opening of the movie, informs Cup and Hot Rod of Unicron. Following Kranix's death, Hot Rod and Cup manage to flee with the help of the Dinobots as well as the little Autobot Wheelie, who directs them toward an escape ship. When the other Autobots arrive on the planet of Junk, the local Junkians attack them before hiding from Galvatron's approaching army. While trying as well as failing to unleash the might of the Matrix, Ultra Magnus rescues the surviving Autobots. Galvatron decimates him and takes possession of the Matrix, intending to utilize it to command Unicron. The neighborhood Junkions, directed by Wreck-Gar, who repairs Magnus, make friends with the Autobots. The Quintessence planet's Autobots have arrived to join them. The Autobots and Junkions, who have their own spacecraft, go to Cybertron after deducing that Galvatron is home to the Matrix. Similar to Ultra Magnus, Galvatron tries to intimidate Unicron, but is unable to activate the Matrix. Unicron changes into a massive robot and starts to destroy Cybertron in reaction to Galvatron's threats. When Galvatron fights him, Unicron suffocates both of them, along with the Matrix. While Unicron fights the Junkions, the Decepticons, and other Cybertronian defenses, the Autobots wreck their spacecraft outward through his eye and split apart. Jazz, Bumblebee, and Cliffjumper are also rescued, and Daniel frees his dad Spike from Unicron's gastrointestinal tract. Unicron pushes Galvatron to battle, as he tries to forge a partnership with Hot Rod. Hot Rod is on the verge of dying, but somehow survives, activates the Matrix, and changes into Rodimus Prime, the next Autobot commander. After destroying Unicron with the help of the Matrix and launching Galvatron into outer space, Rodimus and the other Autobots flee. The Autobots commemorate the conclusion of the conflict and the reclaiming of their home planet as Unicron's decapitated head circles Cybertron while the Decepticons are in chaos following Unicron's strike. Now, let us explore what happens in the Transformers cartoon on the other hand. When the Decepticons and Megatron attacked Autobot City in 2005, Ultra Magnus, the city's leader, oversaw the Autobots' counter-offensive. He and Blur warned the remaining citizens of the onslaught after ordering Springer as well as RC to switch the city into combat station mode. However, they were merely able to repel the Decepticons for so long. Optimus Prime was fatally wounded during the fight, and as he lay dying, gave Ultra Magnus the Matrix of leadership. Despite his own reservations, Magnus gained control of the Matrix and took over as the new Autobot commander. Ultra Magnus, Spike Witwicky, and Cup were taken hostage during the first Galactic Olympics invasion by the Quintessons and carried to Quintessa, wherein they were declared convicted under one of the Quintessons' bizarre trials. When they were thrown into the Sharkticon trap, their fellow Autobots immediately saved them, but when the Quintessons exploded their planet in an effort to wipe out the Autobots, the entire crew was left stranded in space. They finally returned to Cybertron, only for a combined Quintesson-Decepticon coalition to assault their homeworld. Galvatron fired a few bullets at Ultra Magnus before determining he had more pressing matters to attend to. This allowed Rodimus, as well as the others, to flee to safety, as Ultra Magnus managed to defeat Ramjet, Dirge, and Galvatron. Galvatron turned on the aliens after the Quintessons betrayed him in order to accomplish their actual objectives, and the assault on Cybertron was thwarted. Ultra Magnus was stargazing one night when the Quintessons pretended to be Skylinks and kidnapped him. The Quintesson scientists planned to put the Transformers to the test after recently re-establishing contact with their ancient creations. Due to this, Ultra Magnus was put into a danger room scenario, where he had to fight a Rodimus Prime hardlight illusion. The remaining test subjects, Wreck-Gar, Cyclonus, and Marissa Fairborn, were soon presented to him. The prisoners were let free when Ultra Magnus used his own body to overwhelm the electron bars in their cages. The Quintesson spacecraft was in the middle of a violent battle when Ultra Magnus, as well as Cyclonus, started squabbling over who should take it to their respective master. Before the dispute could be settled, the ship started falling into something like a black hole. Magnus was dragged into space during a battle for the final escape pod. Surprisingly, Cyclonus was the one to save Ultra Magnus from the vacuum, since it would have been improper to let such a valiant warrior perish anywhere other than on a battlefield. The spacecraft eventually fell into a black hole, but came out the other end in a hostile world. Thus, this merely served to delay the inevitable. By cooperating, they could only exit the white hole and enter their own universe. While expressing their mutual reluctant admiration for one another as warriors, Magnus and Cyclonus promised that the next time they crossed paths, it would be as rivals. A Decepticon attack later led Rodimus, Ultra Magnus, RC, Cup, and the Witwickies to dock the ship's life pod on a distant Autobot burial barge that had been carried into orbit at the end of the battle with the deactivated remains of lost Autobot soldiers. Despite the fact that Optimus Prime's grave was empty, he was mysteriously still alive. But it quickly became obvious that Prime was insane when he opened fire on Magnus along with the others, leaving them to perish as the barge descended towards the sun. They barely made it out alive since their ship's improvised repairs caused it to crash land back on Cybertron. Ultra Magnus, along with the other Autobots, quickly discovered how Optimus Prime had assembled the whole Autobot fleet to pursue the Quintessence as well as avenge their demise. After catching up to Prime's armada, they disobeyed his instructions and allowed Magnus and his companions to join. Magnus, along with the other Autobots, was able to escape to safety once the Quintessence scheme was discovered. Optimus Prime came to his senses for just long enough to unleash their snare away from the remaining Autobots. Ultra Magnus and the rest heard of Paradron, a Transformer colony world on the opposite side of a vortex, after a wayward Autobot named Sandstorm came on Cybertron. Following Scourge and Cyclonus' inadvertent discovery of the planet's peaceful inhabitants had just come under attack from the Decepticons. Ultra Magnus put up an Autobot attack squad alongside Rodimus to free the Paradronians and stop the Decepticons from obtaining the world's abundant energon supply. With assistance from Wheelie and Blur, Ultra Magnus assumed control of the second expedition, but they encountered a lot of opposition fire. This led them to resort to Plan B, which involved destroying the planet's whole energon core. With a seek and destroy missile, the Constructicons tried to prevent Sandstorm and Magnus from reaching the core, but Ultra Magnus merely plucked the projectile out of midair and flung it back at their enemies. Ultra Magnus ended up taking time to consider his sensitive side inside the core. Ultra Magnus informed Sandstorm that they had 5 minutes to leave the planet once he had placed the charges. They left without stopping at Galvatron and fled to a neighboring moon to see the catastrophe. Ultra Magnus and Rodimus offered Sandstorm, as well as the Paradronians, a place to live back on Cybertron after their world was completely destroyed. When Trypticon was tricked into ravaging Earth for the tyrant Abdul Fakati, Ultra Magnus worked with Metroplex and a large number of other Autobots to destroy the Decepticon metropolis and overthrow Fakati. One night, while keeping an eye on the security cameras, Rodimus Prime, Ultra Magnus, and Cup witnessed Cyclonus and the Sweeps taking off from Cybertron while carrying the former Decepticon, Octane. Magnus and the rest headed out with the aerial bots to confront the raiding force of the Decepticons, since Octane had changed into an independent consultant working with the Autobots. They pushed the opponent right back down to the surface, but after Octane, with his covert companion Cyclonus, revealed a double cross, they let them go. Galvatron was tricked into journeying to Cybertron alone by Cyclonus, who was truly under the influence of Starscream's spirit. There, he was attacked and almost caught by Ultra Magnus, Rodimus, and the other Autobots. While the other Autobots worked on the inaugural Cybertronian Peace Conference, Ultra Magnus and the others prepared a surprise birthday celebration for their buddy Daniel Witwicky. However, the celebration was cut short when the Combaticons launched an attack on the Autobot launch bay in an effort to sabotage the vessel that was being prepared for the conference's attendees. Wheelie received a glancing hit from Vortex during the fight, which left him frightened and confused in the midst of the fighting. Magnus raced out into the firing line, disregarding his own safety, taking numerous blows to the body from Brawl while protecting the wounded Wheelie using his own body. The shuttle sustained some damage before the Combaticons were finally forced away. After the incident, Ultra Magnus requested that First Aid treat the shuttle before treating Magnus's wounds. The idea to throw Ultra Magnus a surprise party on his birthday came to Wheelie and Daniel due to his courage and selflessness. Their sole query was the precise time. In the Autobot Records asteroid, turmoil resulted from their hunt for solutions. Cyclonus, as well as the Decepticons, held them prisoner as they maneuvered the asteroid to collide with the peace meeting. The Autobot defense was thwarted from destroying the asteroid by Wheelie and Daniel, who acted as live barriers. Instead, in order to rescue their companions from the space rock, Ultra Magnus recruited Skylynx. They expelled the sweeps, and Ultra Magnus personally pursued Cyclonus to reroute the asteroid's course. Wheelie started the self-destruct process while the Decepticon was preoccupied, allowing the Autobots to escape and save the peace meeting. The shocked Ultra Magnus noted that even he did not know the date of his birthday after Wheelie and Daniel described what they had been doing. Daniel Witwicky vanished during a Cybertron ambassador reception and was never discovered. Rodimus gave the cassettes, Ultra Magnus and Blaster, the mission of finding him. Daniel and Grimlock had disappeared inside a lost quintessent chamber, which was found thanks to Steeljaw's tracking abilities. Magnus and the rest quickly deduced that their lost comrades had unintentionally entered the Menonian reality due to an antiquated quintessent technique for exiling offenders to alternate realities. During their stay in Menonia, Ultra Magnus, as well as the Autobots, assisted the native Dragon of the Sun, the Golden One, in fending off his cunning apprentice, the banished quintessent called Mara al-Utha. The Golden One helped the Autobots return to Cybertron after giving him his realm back. Ultra Magnus led a group of Autobots to intercept and foil Galvatron and the Constructicons' attempt to use a moon-sized comet as a guided missile to demolish Metroplex. Perceptor, Blaster, Hotspot, Broadside, and maybe Grimlock made up this team, even Superion and Defensor occasionally. Several men who uncannily resembled Bone Crusher and the bodies of Brawn and Huffer were also present, whose sizes might all be changed at pleasure. In any case, Ultra Magnus challenged Galvatron, who tried to transform into a cannon and fire at the Autobot. Unfortunately, because of the angle at which his personality model folio was designed, he could not pivot and shoot before Magnus pounced on him. Galvatron had no discernible moving components, yet he managed to grip and struggle against Ultra Magnus in weapon form. The Constructicons had begun installing artificial engines when one of them exploded, sending the comet rushing towards Eurythma, a neighboring world. Before it could hit, a powerful sonic discharge created by a harmony created by the rhythmic Renaissance elf individuals who existed on Eurythma destroyed it. All the Transformers were thrown out of orbit and onto the planet's surface by the harmony's simple reaction. Ultra Magnus recruited Broadside and Blaster to assist in preventing Galvatron and Soundwave when they searched for the source of the harmony. Lucky for him, Blaster was the only person who could decipher the Eurythmians' harmonic speech. However, he occasionally used Blaster's voice to explain things when Ultra Magnus did some improv. Eventually, Soundwave and Galvatron put the three components of the harmony together, before they departed for Earth to use it to assault Metroplex. Ultra Magnus summoned the Eurythmian leaders along to sing in anti-sound, as well as knock out the harmony as a defense against their harmonic weapon. They sang inaudibly. The harmony was erased from Soundwave's cassettes when Blaster managed to seize his behind. The lesson of the narrative is essentially that sexual assault and breaking the rules of physics are the greatest ways to win the day. The Predacons set up an assault on the Autobots Springer, Ultra Magnus, and Rodimus, who were investigating an electromagnetic disturbance in a distant area of Cybertron. A quintessent invention that transformed Daniel Witwicky's dreams into a material strong enough to cause the Transformers considerable harm halted their battle with Predaking. To escape the odd, constantly changing environment, the Decepticons and Autobots were compelled to ally. A behemoth nearly devoured Ultra Magnus and Divebomb, while a multi-headed Hydra attacked the group as a whole. Danny was finally discovered by the Autobots, who then released him from the devices of Quintessence. Following the destruction of Metroplex's brain and the theft of his eyes by Scourge, as well as the ghost of Starscream, Rodimus Prime, and Ultra Magnus, put Cybertron on high alert should a follow-up attack take place. After noticing the Chaos Bringer had his eyes restored, they discovered that the Decepticon team was working for Unicron. To explore the man-made moon, Magnus formed a small strike squad aboard the Skylynx consisting of Springer, Hotspot, and Groove. The espionage mission didn't go well though, since Unicron's repairs went deeper than they had anticipated, and the Dark God evicted them from his skull with an electrical fire blast. As soon as Scourge learned that Unicron intended to use Cybertron as his new home, he informed the Autobots of his scheme. When Unicron's head came down on Cybertron, Ultra Magnus and his attack teams were ready to make the connections. They detonated a sequence of energon grenades at Unicron's headquarters, sending him right back into space and depriving him of a new body he could call his own. On one occasion on Cybertron, Ultra Magnus was jokingly telling Rodimus Prime about the progress being made on the new super generator when he discovered Rodimus wasn't paying attention at all. Magnus was given a decent bargain on a barely used cloak after delivering Rodimus an ardent speech on the mantle of leadership. Rodimus was fortunate since there was soon a catastrophe on the planet of junk. Several troops were transported to Omega Supreme by Rodimus and Ultra Magnus to witness firsthand the situation with the Junkions. Cyclonus, as well as the Sweeps, shot them down as they traveled, but Ultra Magnus was able to fix Omega's damage so they could keep going to junk. Due to a hypnotic transmission set up by the Quintessence that was triggering hyperaggression and xenophobia in everyone exposed to it, chaos erupted in the sky over the homeworld of the Junkion race. A disruption signal was then transmitted using Blaster's tape deck mode to block the Quintessent broadcasts once Magnus and Blaster identified the signal's source. Rodimus Prime, Ultra Magnus, and Spike Witwicky tried to prevent the two warring groups from ripping each other apart during the peace talks between Zetoxis and Lanark. Fortunately for the Autobots, both the alien races were engaged in a bitter hatred that prevented them from pointing out the Cybertronians' unbelievable hypocrisy and criticizing them after decades of conflict. Galvatron, as well as the Decepticons, was discovered infiltrating an old service tunnel after a new power source was unveiled on Cybertron by Ultra Magnus. He pursued them with a force of Autobots, but both teams of Transformers were engaged in combat with the Transorganics, one of the Quintessence' earlier inventions. Even while each of these biomechanical monsters was lethal, the gigantic Dweller posed a threat to all of them. It turned any Transformer that it came into contact with into power vampires, as well as draining their energy. The aliens almost exhausted Ultra Magnus on multiple occasions, but his fellow Autobots were able to save him. Magnus managed to escape the monster's second attempt at draining him after being spared by Wreck-Gar the previous time. RC and Magnus managed to flee to the top while fighting their way past the Dweller, its zombified victims, as well as Galvatron and his soldiers. They then reported back to Perceptor. The vampiric Transformers were brought back to full functionality by the Autobot scientists' power surge technique, and the Dweller and the Power Core were destroyed by sending it into very deep space. When they got a tip regarding where to catch Victor Drath, the local crime boss, the Autobots were assisting the City of the Future in dealing with a crime wave. Springer, Ultra Magnus, Rodimus, and RC sped to Drath's mansion and right into a trap. The four Autobots had their robot bodies stolen by some astounding technology created by Drath's accomplice, Old Snake, who then transformed them into synthesized human forms. Like Hal Jordan or Reed Richards, Ultra Magnus suddenly wore some extremely distinctive gray temples. Fortunately, each Autobot discovered a jumpsuit close by that precisely matched their robot's color scheme. Tragically, Magnus reportedly failed to wear the cap that matched his suit. Ultra Magnus was ambushed by an extremely hysterical Galvatron and his warriors while on an Isidrite reconnaissance trip with Skylynx alongside the other Autobots. Galvatron was in a hysterical condition that made him just as deadly to his own soldiers as he was to the Autobots. In fact, he knocked aside a Sweep who tried to aid him in his fight against Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus effortlessly led the Autobots in defeating their opponents and made a clean escape with the Isidrite because the Decepticons were so disorganized. As Rodimus Prime doubted his ability to lead, Ultra Magnus felt compelled to deliver a joyful, encouraging speech amid the raging conflict. With Blur, Rodimus Prime, and Perceptor, Ultra Magnus landed hard on the planet Zamogen after crashing in a Quintessent quadrant lock. The basic club-wielding locals were much more of a menace than they should have been due to the planet's astonishingly high population. The Autobots' newest power generator was unveiled on Cybertron by Ultra Magnus, but it was rife with issues from the start, much like several of their prior attempts at alternative forms of energy. First, by pulling the incorrect valves at the opening ceremony, Grimlock almost blasted the entire system. Soon after, Decepticon operatives inserted anti-electrons into the power source, causing the Autobots to have difficulties. Magnus had to go deep below with a small handful of Autobots to stop the power generator's hazardous transmission. Rodimus Prime, Ultra Magnus, Blaster, and Springer were fighting the Decepticons in a trench on a desolate moon when their primitive allies started acting strangely. Both sides' bestial Transformers, including the Dinobots, Skylynx, and others, abruptly left the battleground in response to a siren call that only they could hear. A few seconds later, the energy monster known as Tornadron struck the moon, sapping Ultra Magnus of all of his energy and rendering the whole Transformer race motionless. They weren't ultimately resurrected until Grimlock, as well as the Primitives, took action. Magnus was there when Hot Rod initially recovered after the Stunticons stole the Matrix of Leadership in Japan. Ultra Magnus was among the first to get the hate plague and was changed into a raging lunatic obsessed with killing Rodimus Prime. Rodimus was followed by Magnus through Autobot City when he was overcome by Wreck-Gar, who then infected the Junkion before infecting Rodimus. Magnus, as well as the majority of the universe, were freed from the virus by the revived Optimus Prime in The Return of Optimus Prime, Part 1. When a large Decepticon attack on Autobot City in 2007 was simply a distraction for the heist of the code to the Plasma Energy Chamber, Ultra Magnus stepped in to aid. Magnus then traveled to Cybertron on a spacecraft with Optimus Prime. After receiving the information he needed from Vector Sigma, Prime departed for Nebulos, leaving Ultra Magnus in control of Cybertron. Magnus's administration didn't go well because the same formidable Decepticon assault army attacked the planet. Nevertheless, he attacked Galvatron with the Protectobots, and if Scorponok's troops hadn't shown up, he might have very well killed him. Magnus's power pack was then humiliatingly pulled out, and he slowly started to lose energy. But, before passing out, he told Optimus Prime and the Autobot Headmasters about Galvatron's crazy plan. The golden age of Cybertron had returned when Ultra Magnus finally awakened, and it appeared that the Decepticons had been destroyed forever. Later, Ultra Magnus and several other Autobots gave the young child a cake for Tommy Kennedy's birthday. Ultra Magnus in the Headmasters cartoon. Magnus assumed full-time control of Autobot City on Earth in 2011, oblivious to the fact that the conflict was being staged as a diversion to prevent the Earth-bound Autobots from supporting their brethren on Cybertron, which had also been attacked by Galvatron as well as his new Headmaster warriors. Magnus dispatched all of these troops to the area where the major Decepticon attack was taking place. Ultra Magnus initially engaged in combat with Six-Shot, the ninja commander of the Decepticons and commander of their Earth-based forces throughout the conflict. When the Trainbots and Metroplex arrived to break up the fight, a few Autobots could return to the city and proceed through the space bridge to the war on Cybertron. The pair then demonstrated their combat techniques for each other. Following the destruction of the Decepticons, Ultra Magnus assisted in organizing the hunt on Earth for the lost Matrix of Leadership, which was necessary to stabilize the unstable Vector Sigma. Magnus organized squads to intervene and keep the Decepticons off of the Autobots' backs, while Hot Rod, as well as the recently arriving Autobot Headmasters, took the initiative in the hunt. Trypticon appeared to be making progress on an oil rig, and Ultra Magnus, as well as Jazz, ordered Metroplex to stop him. Once the Decepticons' latest weapon, the Mad Machine, incapacitated Metroplex using an electromagnetic strike, they quickly realized they'd been tricked into falling into a trap. In the Great Cassette Operation, Magnus additionally saw the first assault of the next Decepticon weapon, the metal-warping meteorite Metamorphose, when it warped a survey vessel from which he was getting a report. Rodimus Prime visited Earth after hearing of a new energy revelation from another one of the Autobots' bases on this planet. When he arrived, Ultra Magnus was perplexed because he had not heard of such a thing. The two investigated and found that the outpost's entire crew had been murdered. Following their departure from Mars, the Decepticons withdrew to their headquarters on Earth, and Ultra Magnus ordered Twincast to investigate. The fact that they had all departed to see the construction of a massive new Transtector from the Decepticon Headmaster Commander Scorponok surprised him. The Autobots on Athenia had Ultra Magnus organize the shipment of part of Earth's stockpile of Energon cubes in response to Sandra's plea for energy assistance. Magnus told Athenia about the raid after he finished body-slamming Galvatron, and they chose to send some of their own caches alternatively while the Decepticons remained engaged, preventing the Trainbots from getting off with the Energon. While the other Autobots and the Headmasters departed to hunt the Decepticons who'd been robbing worlds of energy in outer space, Magnus stayed stationed on Earth. After the Decepticons had finished pillaging the cosmos, they came back to Earth with even more grandiose ambitions for it. Galvatron wanted to assimilate it into his system, and Six-Shot had made it his mission to destroy the Autobot resistance. Ultra Magnus coordinated the reaction independently since he didn't want to burden the already overburdened Autobot leader Fortress with this information. However, he soon incurred a direct attack from Six-Shot. However, before any backup could come, Six-Shot used his hidden 7th Wingwolf form to deliver the fatal blow on Ultra Magnus, taking the life of the city commander. He was fighting against the Sixth Changer when the trainbots persuaded him to alert Fortress. Metroplex requested that Magnus's corpse be interred on the Earth that he had cherished so much, rather than being shot into space when the enraged Headmasters drove the Decepticons away. Magnus's remains were placed in a burial bier and subsequently buried in a cave off the coast of Japan in compliance with those desires. Later, on Juno, Six-Shot dared Chrome Dome to a death-defying combat. For the sake of Ultra Magnus, as well as everyone else he had killed, Chrome Dome vowed to stop the murderer. Ultimately, Scorponok's schemes drove the two to cooperate to avoid imminent death and save Daniel. In the end, Six-Shot's allegiances were altered, and Ultra Magnus was finally avenged. Not by murdering his executioner, but rather by, wait for it, saving him. Ultra Magnus's amazing storyline in the comic series. The Autobots sought Ultra Magnus for direction after Optimus Prime, as well as the leader of the Decepticons, Megatron, disappeared in a space bridge disaster 6.5 million years ago. Magnus escaped and distanced himself because he felt unprepared. Magnus believed that Grimlock might die, which was humorous. But when Magnus re-emerged nearly a million years down the line, he discovered that the Autobots had split up into several factions. Magnus reunited the Autobots and recaptured Cybertron city after city until, at last, the Autobots were guaranteed victory in spite of concerns about his incompetence. Both Ratbat's Ultracons and Shockwave's Decepticons were prepared to give up. Ultra Magnus dwelled in his quarters all by himself, blaming Optimus for his heroic martyrdom, but yet left his species to bear the torch themselves only seconds before a peace accord was to be ratified at Tiger Pax. Despite the unfortunate fact that Starscream killed the remaining Council of Ancients members, Ultra Magnus could effectively command his Autobots, Ultracons, and Decepticons against the Predacon uprising. Grimlock reportedly killed the Dinobot by taking an assassin's bullet intended for Ultra Magnus when the Predacons were being apprehended. Magnus held Grimlock's corpse in his hands and sobbed aloud as he was overtaken with sadness. To put it mildly, this wouldn't be the only setback of the day. Megatron had somehow surfaced amid the commotion following Grimlock's demise, supported by the Aerospace Extermination Squadron. The Harmony Magnus had fought so hard for disintegrated instantly. Deep beneath Cybertron's surface, Ultra Magnus, along with the remaining Autobots, was forced to work as enslaved people. Magnus was a crucial character in the original content that Marvel UK created alongside reproductions of American stories, even though he was never featured in Marvel's American comics. Magnus, who was from the present period in these escapades, regularly sparred with the Decepticon commander Galvatron. Magnus was originally intended to help the Wreckers in a mission for the Autobot rebellion on Cybertron, but he was diverted to look into Optimus Prime's absence on Earth, which was a direct result of Galvatron's time travel. Magnus deceived Galvatron into going back in time to restore Optimus Prime with the help of some Autobots from the future, but by delaying his trip back to Cybertron, he could not help the Wreckers and their commander was slain. To make up for his previous failure, Magnus did fall for a trick that nearly resulted in the Wreckers alongside him executing Optimus as a forgery. Magnus had concerns about Prime's behavior, and after getting Optimus's identity confirmed, the two started cooperating as a surprisingly effective group for the Autobot rebellion on Cybertron. The Decepticons finally dragged them, along with Megatron, through a space bridge to Earth out of concern for the unrestrained force of their leader's antimatter abilities, which he had utilized as a last option against the Autobot pair. Ultra Magnus was abandoned in a distant wooded area, while Megatron and Prime quickly returned to their forces. He decided to locate the remaining Autobots on Earth, but he also recognized an exceptional chance to experience some tranquility while he traveled the globe. Magnus's calm journey ended as Galvatron came back with new plans to strengthen himself by drawing power from a volcano. Magnus received more assistance from future Autobots, but they were ineffective this time. By burying himself and Galvatron in the volcano, Magnus could stop Galvatron on his own despite his growing terror of the future Decepticon. Magnus was found by the Sparkabots, Fizzle, Sizzle, and Guzzle, who later became his traveling companions. Galvatron eventually released himself after a while. Magnus was frozen with dread when he and the Sparkabots faced Galvatron while looking into Shockwave's actions, but all his previous confrontations had taken their toll. When the lives of his comrades were in danger, Magnus rose to the occasion, overcame his anxieties, defeated Galvatron, and promised to vanquish him the next time they faced off. However, a final confrontation between Magnus and Galvatron was not to be. In his final stories in the Marvel UK line, he fought alongside the Wreckers and their temporarily resurrected former leader, Impactor, against Transformer ghouls and an Autobot mad scientist, before ending illegal rink battles on Cybertron. Sentinel Prime's security team on Cybertron included Ultra Magnus. Despite being allied with the Autobots, he would pursue an independent objective of apprehending and punishing every criminal on Cybertron. He would eventually travel to the planet Zull to apprehend Swindle, who was sought for selling critical mass weapons. Karzai Lorcha, a resident of the planet, attempted to protect Swindle, but Magnus overpowered all of his guards, caught Swindle, and warned Lorcha that he knew he was harboring fugitives and that he would bring down Zull if he was found with some other Cybertronian criminal. Swindle chose to make a bargain with Magnus as they were transporting him to the local Decepticon command center to stand trial and face a military tribunal. Magnus claims he cannot persuade Swindle to break the law, but Swindle informs him that he knows where Scorponok is. Upon learning this, Magnus finally decides to pursue Scorponok, owing to how notorious Scorponok's misdeeds are, leaving Swindle in a distant world. These were for violating the prohibitions on disseminating Cybertronian knowledge and other crimes. With the use of Swindle's knowledge, Magnus finds himself in Nebulos. He enters the Zarak Consortium, which he believes to be where Scorponok resides, under several disguises. Scorponok recognizes him despite his disguises, and Magnus moves immediately in an attempt to stop him. As they are fighting, Zarak approaches and attempts to break up the battle, but Scorponok accidentally kills Zarak in the process. He then flees and hides his traces so Magnus can't find him. Magnus eventually tracks down Swindle on the planet Buras, and the two strike up another agreement. Ultra Magnus was created in the expansion, which came before the War of the Threefold Spark, according to the 2019 IDW Continuity. Magnus struggled with the idea of mercy and the cultural effects of war, despite beginning his career as a model soldier, brave, loyal, determined, and unflappable on the battlefield. But thanks to the dedication of his advisor Alpha Trion and an excursion to the Tarnhauser Gate, Magnus was eventually able to moderate his strategy to both peace and conflict. Ultra Magnus ascended to serve as one of the four great generals in charge of directing the military operation against Ex-Archon and his allies during the War of the Threefold Spark. He had several Cybertronians working for him, including Megatron, who frequently battled alongside him. He served throughout the conflict, and he and Diatlas were there for Highbrow's briefing on Ex-Archon's peculiar physiology on the day of the pivotal fight against the Threefold Spark at Iacon. By the time Sentinel Prime came into power, Ultra Magnus had retired from the military. He had joined Cybertron's Colonial Security Branch, where he was given command of the Cybertronian spaceship Fist of Iacon. To the amusement of his second in charge, Chrome Dome, Magnus could quench his need for adventure now that Cybertron was at peace, while Victory Leo acted as his space bodyguard. Because of this, Sentinel Prime was unable to contact Magnus as well as his crew for aid during the Decepticon crisis because they were too far away from Cybertron. Magnus and his crew were therefore too distant from Cybertron in order for Sentinel Prime to solicit their aid during the Decepticon crisis. Magnus learned through Jazz that Alpha Trion had vanished after battling a horde of silicon parasites on a far-off asteroid. After dispatching his squad back to the Fist, Magnus investigated the planet independently and found a cell of organ-stealing splice thieves led by Spinister. Magnus had traced Trion to the remote world of Quaria. There, the crew blasted on and destroyed a neighboring spaceship. Spinister revealed that he had seized the remainder of Magnus' squad and used them as a negotiating tool to force Magnus into pursuing Trion to the fatal Black Sphere's system, despite the fact that Magnus wanted to arrest the criminal. Spinister was focused on the antiquated Cybertronian artifacts Trion had already set out to recover. Marvelous appearances of Ultra Magnus in other media. Optimus informs Ultra Magnus that their hit-and-run operations are not viable. He worries that there could not be any more Energon because Cybertron is in ruins. Although Ultra Magnus is more concerned with survival than anything else and urges Optimus to sign the deal, Optimus is certain that they would still have a chance. Ultra Magnus approaches Megatron and gives up. He remembers the Tarnhauser Gate combat, where he preserved Megatron's life. Together, they prevailed in that conflict. When they battled, they were brothers. Ultra Magnus is sick of fighting all the time. Prime, however, won't pay attention to Ultra Magnus. He hoped they could all have a seat together. Megatron desires Ultra to tell the Autobots to back down, but Ultra won't make them do anything they believe to be wrong. Megatron and Shockwave's scheme to locate the Allspark is overheard by Ultra Magnus, who informs Optimus about it. When Megatron meets Ultra in his jail, he informs him that by sending the signal to Prime, he destroyed all possibility of an amicable cooperation. They were able to take advantage of it nevertheless. They have access to his communication frequency and want to murder the Autobots. Later, Megatron seeks information from Ultra Magnus about where Optimus is. When he declines, Megatron smacks him and tells Shockwave to start setting up the Autobots for reformatting. Shockwave interrogates Ultra Magnus to learn where Autobot Command is. Ultra Magnus tells Megatron that Optimus will end this conflict. Ultra won't give up, and therefore Shockwave must use even more unconventional strategies. However, Ultra Magnus commands Megatron to turn around by stealing a gun from just a Decepticon and pointing it at him. Megatron declines, however, since he knows that Ultra Magnus would feel it dishonorable to shoot a person in the back. Jetfire thus takes Magnus hostage and disarms his rifle. The tough Ultra Magnus is tortured once more by Shockwave. Megatron is warned not to put Cybertron through hardship or turn into the enemies that they fought for their freedom. They get what they want when Ultra Magnus caves and tells them where Autobot Command is. To go to Tarnhauser Gate, Megatron takes Ultra Magnus. Tarnhauser saw the greatest number of Cybertronian casualties in history. According to Megatron, Alpha Trion incited a revolt, and the Autobots tainted his message. They had been led to Alpha Trion's monument by Ultra Magnus, posing as Autobot Command. After asking Barricade whether the ground troops were prepared, Megatron questioned Jetfire whether the Seekers were prepared. A vacant chamber was seen when Ultra Magnus unlocked the door. When Megatron discovered he had been duped, he shot Ultra in the chest with his blaster, killing him. Jetfire showed up. Ultra Magnus's eyes brightened as the Alpha Trion protocols began to emerge from him. Since the Generation 1 character called God Magnus is mostly in the Japanese series Transformers Car Robots from 2000, Ultra Magnus hasn't appeared as a new character. God Magnus borrowed the name and alternative mode from Ultra Magnus, as well as from God Bomber, a previous character who was dismantled to create armor for his Prime-styled companion. So when the show was transcribed for distribution in the West back in 2001 as Transformers Robots in Disguise, the title change was obvious, and Ultra Magnus made a comeback to TV for the very first time since the G1 series. Later, a smaller Magnus Spy Changer figure was made exclusive to Robots in Disguise. Ultra Magnus can carry other Autobots, including the Autobot brothers, by transforming into a vehicle carrier. He's equipped with the Blue Bolts, a variable configuration weapon with incredible destructive power and exceptional strength and combat skills. His weapon may either shoot as a powerful laser or a rapid-fire pistol. He can fly briefly thanks to the jetpack on his back. With these new skills, Omega Prime could finally join forces with Optimus Prime from the Robots in Disguise toy line to create Ultra Magnus. Marvelous verdict. Ultra Magnus is completely prepared to give his life if necessary for the greater good because he only sees himself as a soldier. He will attack more significant dangers since he knows he is more formidable than the usual Autobot. He's courageous, unselfish, dependable, strong, and determined. Due to his bravery and selflessness, he has earned the respect of both the Decepticons and the Autobots. Because Galvatron could be the most lethal adversary of all, he and Galvatron have a unique animosity for one another. He actively avoids possibilities for greater responsibility and greatly enjoys receiving orders. However, he betrays his true aptitude for the position when coerced into such situations. Ultra Magnus is sadly the only Autobot that is unaware of it. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.
Hand over one good eye any day.